Girl.
Dude.
Let's talk about it.
Welcome.
We're here to discuss the book, Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reid.
Let's get into it. If you watch a show and don't immediately trade memes and giggles with your best Judy, did you really have a few viewing experience?
Of course not. When the credits roll, that's our signal to debrief.
I'm Jose Miguel.
And I'm Lesley.
And we've been friends since we were kids.
And we realize some shows are just too good not to gab about. This is Heated Reverence.
Why don't you read the description that is at the back of the book?
Pro hockey star Shane Hollander isn't just crazy talented. He's got spotless reputation. Hockey is his life. Now that he's a captain on the Montreal Voyageurs, he won't let anything jeopardize that, especially the sexy Russian whose hard body keeps him awake at night. Boston Bears captain Ilya Rozanov is everything Shane's not. The self-proclaiming king of the ice. He's as cocky as he is talented. No one can beat him except Shane. They've made a career on their legendary rivalry, but when the skates come off, the heat between them is undeniable. When Ilya realizes he wants more than a few secret hookups, he knows he must walk away. The risk is too great. As their attraction intensifies, they struggle to keep their relationships out of the public eye. If the truth comes out, it could ruin them both. But when their need for each other rivals their ambitions on the ice, secrecy is no longer an option.
What are your overarching thoughts?
I was surprised by a lot of things. I was impressed by a lot of things, but also felt like, holy shit, what are we reading right now? And listening to it was a very different vibe. My initial first 2 minutes, I was like, I'm going to hate this. This guy's voice is annoying. And then when he started to go into voicing over Ilya, I was like, oh, I understand why he's doing it.
I was surprised by how often they thought about ending their situationship. Now that we've read the book, does it change how you perceive the show?
1000%. When we start to look at these characters and how they're being developed and how they're being presented, when I first was listening to how this narrator was describing Shane and then describing Ilya, to me, these characters were not the same people we saw on the show. And at first, if you remember when we were talking, I thought Ilya was an asshole. To me, it seemed like Shane is the asshole in the book. So there were so many different moments that really kind of just stood out when looking at the book versus the show. I love both. And I love them both separately, not together. How about you?
I'm glad I went into the show without any preconceived notions from the book. When I do it the other way around, I am inevitably frustrated. There were specific concrete things that I thought made the show so fascinating that weren't in the book, or vice versa. It stood out to me in the show that Ilya was in a different stage of accepting his sexuality than Shane was. But then when we're reading the book, there are parts of it where it seems pretty clear that Ilya is also struggling with that. The way that the actors represented it in the show, it didn't seem that way. Another example, I thought that Ilya going back to the hotel after going to the club and ending the night alone, in the show, I thought it was character growth, right? But in the book, it turns out that he wouldn't have been able to score with her anyway because the chick in the club was actually there with a boyfriend, and there was some sort of kink going on there. And so I perceived that as this monumental thing about his character, he's growing up and meaningless hookups didn't mean anything to him anymore. But when I read the book, it was just oh, he would have struck out with her.
Well, I think another example, too, is we hear of Ilya talking about how much he loves Shane so early on in the book compared to when we hear it in the show. This guy is talking about loving him from almost day one, basically.
What was in the book that didn't make it into the show? Anything stick out?
How much Shane drinks. Even in the first, the epilogue, there's a discussion of him sitting on a couch having a beer. I was like, what? Shane's drinking a beer? Where's the ginger ale? But it was just how much emphasis there was in the show about this damn ginger ale.
How about the fact that Shane had hooked up with other people?
Yes.
I thought it was just Ilya. Do you think that that the show would have benefited from showing that?
That's a good question. I think it would have changed how we grew to like understand him. Hudson playing Shane is not the character I envision in the book. And like, I see this sweet, young 20-something-year-old kid who is a professional hockey player. When I look at Hudson, when I read Shane in the book, I don't see that same person. And it's hard to think that he had other partners that weren't Ilya when reading this book and seeing who he is. It's a weird dichotomy. Like, I don't even know if that makes any sense. But like in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I can't picture Shane, who we know as this character, having these other relationships. Does it benefit? Like, would we have benefited from the story? No. But you know what? What if it comes out in season 2?
I mean, it could.
Maybe.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It would have been more realistic if they would have shown him hooking up with other guys, trying to see if he could connect with another guy, basically figuring out his sexuality outside of, is it just about Ilya? From the people that I know that have been on this journey, there have been people who have said, like, I'm straight, but I'm married to a woman. So I feel like having the layer of seeing him explore his sexuality with other people may have been more realistic.
And I also agree to that now, thinking about it in a layered perspective. Like, if he's the only guy you have ever been with, then are you okay with that being the only guy you're with forever? Do you know what I'm saying? Because
yeah,
I'm sure we'll talk about this here in a minute, but like, it makes sense to hear how the book progresses to where we get towards the end, knowing that he has had other male, partners, even if it wasn't like a big deal, but he's already tried it. Whereas in the show, we see at the ending that they kind of, drive off into like the sunset of it all. It's like, that's cute. This is your one boyfriend and the only boyfriend you'll ever have, kind of a thing, right? Huh. Okay.
Maybe we'll get more insight. I mean, they can always do flashbacks.
Yeah.
Give me another thought.
Well, I mean, can we just skip to the big part? Because I feel like that. Okay, chapter 27 in this book, I just was like, wait, how much longer can we play out? We see them leave Shane's parents' house. They talk about coming to the house to have salad or whatever, call, text or whatever. But then there's this whole life that happens.
Hello, Ilya talks about marriage.
Not just once.
He talks about like realizing that this was going to be his sex life from now on. Playfully, he says the thing about like, I'll propose. Ilya says, and I will say, Shane Hollander, will you please marry me so I can become a Canadian citizen faster?
Yeah.
And Shane bursts out laughing, shoves him, says, you're such an asshole. And Ilya continues and says, and you will say yes because you are a nice, helpful guy.
Do you have anything else to add to that? Because I have so much that I want to say about it right now.
Shane says that he would say yes, but it's because he would be still madly in love with him. Like, they're already talking about marriage. That was huge to me.
I think that the thing that, for me, why it all seems so normal, let's just start with that, and real, is because it's prolonged from the time that this, like, 2014, I think it was, when this all kind of started. And we're like, is it almost 10 years later at this point? I don't know. I lost track of how many years it was. These dudes have been in love for a long time. I, like, cried and laughed at the same time when that whole like scene was rolling in my ears. All the sound effects coming out of my mouth, like between the laughter and like the gasping for air, clutching my pearl, like the whole thing just happened. And if anybody saw me, thought, what the fuck is this guy on? Because it was just comical.
The conference, like, we get the payoff of actually seeing them put their plan into action. I thought that was huge. I am glad we didn't get it like tagged on.
We wouldn't have what we have right now.
What are your thoughts about Hayden?
I knew that he'd be the supportive best friend. It was very interesting to see that Hayden actually really hated Ilya. I did not expect that. Like, I thought it was a rivalry like it has been for everybody else. But like, it almost was like Hayden was super protective of Shane. Damn, the love does not flow. But then to see that whole exchange of like, you guys get out of the bathroom, I have to pee, and they like pat each other on the back kind of a thing. I hope that straight dudes who watch the series with their wives, that their wives convince them to read the book, to go deeper into the characterization and the development of like, this is real life. And I'm sure there's a lot of people generationally that like are totally okay with how you have heterosexual friends and gay friends and you're really close to each other. But it's still such a hard thing in our society for that to really be fully realized. I think if it wasn't for like our generation to kind of make it not feel awkward or weird, that these other people would probably still have this awkward weirdness of like, well, they're gay kind of a thing. And you're looking at them holding hands. The way that it was evolved and how the scene developed and how it was forming and we got to this point of like, call it a climax at the book, was just beautiful to me. And I was very like in my emotions with it because I was just like, wow, thank you, Rachel.
That line where Ilya says, oh no, how can I impress Montreal's 15th best player when he was talking about Hayden?
Yeah.
I am so looking forward to that dynamic of them not liking each other and Shane having to like
be in the middle.
Play nice, guys. Play nice.
Wait, the other thing too that like just occurred to me, and when you said it in that tone, was like when this kind of comes out and it's public, is there going to be a side where one of them sounds more feminine than masculine over the other?
Did I just say that in one gender versus another?
You kind of did because
how did I say it?
But you didn't. You said it without saying it. In reality,
okay.
I heard it, not with you saying it. It was more of like, there's always this fucked up thing in the queer community where like you're almost meant to feel less masculine if you're a bottom versus a top. I think in the context of like sex or relationships, there's this, whatever it is. But when you start to talk about it outside of those parallels and you're just talking about it with another man who happens to be gay, there's like, well, if he's a bottom, then he must be a femme. And that's not really the case. Like, I think it's much more open and you can like, you don't even know anymore if that's really the case. But I wonder how that will play out. How will they make these characters feel and seem as we've seen them? Because together there's something different. But when they're, you know what I'm saying? I don't know why that came to my mind. It was just the way you just said what that line about like, let's play nice, boys. Let's play nice. Leave it to me to go down a rabbit hole.
No, that is interesting. Obviously, I don't have the lived experience, right? But, well, no, fuck that. I do kind of have the lived experience. I have a lived experience of being with somebody for a really long time, right? And your personalities do kind of merge. So I would think that just like we heard the nod in Scott saying to Shane, you're starting to sound like him.
Starting to sound like him. I'm sorry, what? You fucking heard me, Hollander.
I wonder if Shane is going to become a little more...
Dick?
I don't know what I wouldn't say dick. I would, because I love Ilya. I don't think he's a dick. I would say more like a badass, more of a
an alpha.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. I mean, again, it goes back to the way we see Shane is like this timid young kid and he becomes a man as we kind of see him develop as a character. And in the book, immediately I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? This just from the very beginning. And I'm like, damn, he's like, my whole perception of who he is in the book is very different from how I saw him on the show. Not just from like the whole, like, the drinking piece. I think that's not even the thing, but it's just a very interesting comparison. But just how he's described, it's very much more of like this dominant masculine character. He seems so insecure in the show. Whereas in the book, this guy knows what he wants. He's going to get what he wants. And he does what he wants. He becomes vulnerable through Ilya. And Ilya seems like the most vulnerable one in the book, but the sweetest heart. So I'm just like, this is blowing my mind. I'm like, I'm obsessed with Ilya in the book.
Shane was living rent-free in his mind. Remember in the very first episode, we first see Ilya watching Shane play hockey first. And then we see that Shane sees that. And then Shane and his mom are then watching Ilya when he's on the ice, right? It was the opposite in the book. Those little changes, the subtleties, I think it does change the perspective. Ilya was a very multidimensional character within the show, but he was not as self-assured as he presented in the show.
1,000%.
Okay, so let's get into our weekly traditions, moment that ruined our brain. Do you want to do yours first?
Yeah. So I'm going to read a section of what really kind of ruined my brain particularly. And I think the reason I'm reading this is because it's just how it's narrated, but also what really forms my perception and understanding of the character. And you'll know what I'm talking about if you read the book. Like if you know, you know. An hour later, showered, changed, and finally alone, Shane drove himself home. Not to his Westmount penthouse, but the one nobody knew about. Shane only spent a few nights a year at the small condominium in the Plateau. It was where he went when he wanted to be sure of total privacy. He parked in the tiny lot behind the 3-story building, let himself in the back door, and quickly climbed the stairs to the top floor. He knew the other 2 floors were unoccupied because he owned those 2. The bottom floor was rented to a high-end kitchenware boutique which had closed for the night hours ago. The condo on the 3rd floor looked like what it was, a demo condo that had been decorated by a professional house stager. Technically, this was the condo that would be used to sell this one and the one below it, if Shane was ever interested in selling, which he told himself he definitely would be doing soon. He had been telling himself this for over 3 years. He went on to the stainless steel fridge, took out one of his 5 bottles of beer, the only thing in this pristine refrigerator. He twisted the cap off and sat himself on the black leather sofa in the living room area. Listening to the announcer say this, or the voiceover, or the reader, was mind-boggling to me, because the perception of Shane was not what it really was. It was like, who is this person? Are we talking about Shane? I had to go back the first time I listened to it and see who we were talking about and why is this coming up first. In my brain, I was just trying to like, It was a moment of not confusion, like, is this really happening? Is this who this is? Is this how the book is really kicking off? And it ruined my brain because I just have this vision of Shane Hollander, who isn't this guy who seemed kind of douchey, but also like, okay, he's serving like rich daddy vibes kind of a thing. Oh, the one of the 3 condos that he has, and the one that nobody knows about because you're having loads of sex in this condo. Whatever.
Why does that strike you as douchey, though?
It's not that it's just douchey. I don't know. Do you know anybody who has all these apartments and just chooses not to sell them and just goes to one of them? Maybe douchey is not the right word to describe what I'm thinking. It's probably a very judgmental perception.
But you get why, right? Why he has that extra condo.
Yes.
Right?
No, of course I get why he has the extra condo.
It's his fuck palette.
Yes. No, 1,000. Of course I know why he has the extra condo. I just think in the framework of coming off of watching this show to then starting this book and not like, wait, this is Shane Hollander. He like has all these, he drinks beer and he has this condo, and like there's so many things that I'm like, this isn't the person who I just met from watching on television.
In the show, Ilya calls Shane Mr. Real Estate, Mr. Businessman. I felt like it was probably a nod to this, the fact that he owns multiple properties.
Yes, but not the fact that there was one that was hidden and that it was a secret one that no one knew about. Because we don't think that Shane has ever had sex with anybody else when we watch the show.
Right.
And so wait, why does he have a secret place that nobody knows about? I knew in my mind, I was like, oh, this is probably where he goes to have sex. But like, I didn't know that at this point of like listening to the book. It was like, okay, you're so fancy hotshot. Okay, you know?
Yeah.
So there was so many different things that kind of just came with that new territory that you just learned about. And it was just unraveling so quickly in listening to this person reading it. So yeah, it was just wild.
I was taken aback by it too, but it didn't change the way I was perceiving him. I just thought, okay, so he's really extra. For me, the moment that ruined my brain was basically Ilya, he thought his smile was going to split his face. It says he was overwhelmingly happy. Shane was beaming up at him, eyes bright and freckles crinkled, and Ilya loved him and Shane loved him. Holy fucking shit, Shane Hollander is in love with me. He couldn't fucking believe it. It was like Tom Cruise jumping on the couch back in the day. In the show, it was depicted as this relief. Like he was finally able to let his guard down.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, it was a little more like beaming.
Ilya in the book just is the best character I could have ever wished for. And he is so like unaware how emotionally aware he is.
I was just seeing it from the lens of the show that he was happy, but I didn't know that he was like, holy shit, this person
loves me.
This particular person loves me.
And it's the person that I've always loved, but I've never been able to say it. And I can say it now because he loves me too.
Let's move on to Heat versus Heart. So books tend to lean heavier into one direction over the other. I think they probably do that for like marketing purposes or whatever. My verdict is that Heat wins in the book.
Ding, 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 ding.
I'm going to admit something to you. We once talked about how people were learning things about sexuality and gay sexual relations that they didn't necessarily know about before the show. I had a moment where I realized that I didn't know something. Cut to episode 2 when Ilya tells Shane to show off for him. When I was watching the show, I thought, why did he go like, oh, Hollander? They've hooked up before. He's seen him naked before. I thought Shane was like jerking off. So I didn't understand like what would cause him to have that reaction of fuck Hollander. But then I read the book and it says Shane got to work. It was undeniably humiliating to be splayed out on the bed like this. Shane's fingers 2 knuckles deep into his own ass while Ilya Rozanov calmly sipped his vodka and watched everything like he was going to be tested on it later. That blew my mind. I was like, oh, that's what he was reacting to. My bad. I had no idea.
Didn't plan on turning that page, huh?
Obviously, he has to prepare himself, but it went over my head when I was watching the show.
But I also think that like the show, they did a beautiful job with layering the pieces and the moments that were, I think if you use the term erotica from like back in how sex was very taboo in the 90s, for the gay world in sex, like this is shit that's never been seen before or even talked about out loud. And so to read this scene in the book and to now reflect on it and how it played out on television, we probably won't ever see that on television. But I think if you are fully aware of what's actually happening, the dynamics, had to have been something like this happening that was supposed to be left to our imagination. I didn't pick up on the way you picked up on it when reading the book and then, turning it back to like the episode. I think it was like those moments happened, but we can't show that. Do you know what I'm saying? And so by
because it would make it a porn.
Yeah, exactly. And so like by reading the book, I was like, oh, okay. It was a good part. Trust me. I was like, what? But still like I didn't clock it in the way you did. I love that's how you clock things. Like it makes me like, oh, like I'm like, tell me something I don't know because you're always going to tell me something I don't know. This book is spicy. The book is fucking spicy. I'm going to say 2 words. Chapter 13.
Say more.
I feel like this was a pivotal moment in the book, but also in the show. And there's so much detail. The conversation they're having about relationships and women and how it forms in the conversation in the book is so much deeper and not like, I don't want to say that it was surface level in the show. I feel like we clearly see Shane getting uncomfortable in the show. In the book, he is like out of body experience kind of a thing. But then the sex is in a whole different level. Just how it was all described, how it was all framed. I'm leaving a lot to the imagination. I want people to go read the book and I want people to read chapter 13 and see how it hits you. And if you have an audible version, listen to it. Do yourself a favor. Listen to it.
For the sake of this podcast, we did a little spin on the penalty box. The exercise that we were giving ourselves was what did the book get wrong compared to what was on the show? And the one thing that stood out to me was the depiction of Svetlana. The things that made me fall in love with her, she doesn't have that much dimension. So I was kind of missing that. What about you?
To your point of like Svetlana, right? There was other people in there. How about Rose? We didn't have a lot of Rose in the book.
Tell me, what is your most relatable moment?
For me, if there's anything that I've kind of taken away from this book, is it makes me realize how much sex I'm not having. Because there's a lot of sex happening in this book.
Towards the end of the book, Shane is saying, I keep thinking about logistics. And Ilya's like really pulling out all the stops, all the moves. And is getting frustrated that Shane is still like fixated on hammering out all the minute details of the plan. And he's like, how can you even think about that right now? Like my head is racing. That was the most relatable for me. because I'm like that. Being organized, being thought out, being strategic about things, that makes me happy. Once we have the plan, we can do it.
Get down to business afterwards.
Yeah, we can celebrate. I mean, the Container Store parking lot in Long Island has seen some things.
I'm banned from Staples, so don't even get me going.
I thrive once I know a place for everything in its place.
Everything has a spot, yeah, and it has its label.
Right.
My closets, people are like, wait, you color code your shirts? Yeah, motherfucker, solids with solids and patterns with patterns. And it has to be by the pattern, by the color. I chuckled at that moment, though. I thought it was really funny to see like their chemistry. It sounded like they were a married couple a little bit already without really having that label.
Well, now that we've overshared with the internet, it's time to wrap this up. Join us next time as we discuss Game Changer.
Sweet. Heated Reverence is hosted by Jose Miguel Longo and Lesley Obando.
If you enjoyed obsessing with us, hit the like button, and more importantly, follow the show or subscribe so you're invited to every hang session.
Tell us your own heat and heart score or the exact second a scene ruined your brain on Instagram and TikTok at Heated Reverence. You can also catch the full video version of the show on our YouTube channel.
And for long-form thoughts that need more than a caption, hit us at heatedreverence@gmail.com. We'll see you next week.